Today we will discuss the reading task 2 in chapter 9 related to mental summarizing and active reading. The paras have been numbered for the convenience of forming a mind map of the thought flow. So let us start with the first paragraph. Democracy rests on a tension between two different principles. There is, on the one hand, the principle of equality before the law, and more generally of equality, and on the other hand, what may be described as the leadership principle. The first gives priority to rules, and the second to persons. No matter how skillfully we contrive our schemes, there is a point beyond which the one principle cannot be promoted without some sacrifice of the other. So clearly, based on the kind of assertions made here, clearly this seems to be the main idea of the passage. So good writers are normally told that state your main idea up front. So first para is therefore very important. Sometimes they build background information, then come to the main idea. So somewhere between first, second paras, you will find the main idea being highlighted. So let us see here. So democracy rests on a tension. That means there are two principles in operation on which democracy operates, and there is tension between them. Okay. The first principle is equality before the law. So we all know that in, let's say, India as a democracy, we are all equal before the law. If Indira Gandhi does something wrong, she went to jail. Salman Khan went to jail. So nobody is spared if he is on the wrong side of the law. Right. So we are all equal before the law. That's one principle on which democracy operates. The other is the leadership principle. Now, yes, obviously, every country, whether democracy or totalitarian, needs a leader. But obviously, in totalitarian societies or communist and other societies, the whole party, it's a dictatorship, so leader question is always there. But democracy also needs a leader like any other system. So I don't know what this they're trying to say, but this is how your thought should be working. You should be thinking as you're reading. That is what is active reading, because then you are also mentally summarizing. So the point is democracy, you've seen there are two principles, and then he brings out that the one principle cannot be promoted without some sacrifice of the other. That means if we promote one, the equality principle, the leadership principle will be undermined or will sacrifice something of it. Or if leadership is promoted, equality will get sacrificed. Okay, so this seems to be the point he is going to develop on in the rest of the passage. So now you are in a way predicting what is likely to come. So as we saw in the previous reading task 1, as you read, you predict what will come next, and then you confirm whether this is what he's saying or not, or is he giving some other twist, and so on. So para 2, Alexis de Tocqueville, the greatest 19th century writer on democracy, he was a French scholar who wrote a book on the democracy as practiced in America. So he, in fact, recommended that the aristocratic societies of Europe adopt the democratic model or system being followed in America, though he had many criticisms of democracy as well. Right? So this is otherwise background knowledge. Well, let's proceed further as to what is the relevant part related to today's topic. So he maintained that the age of democracy, whose birth he was witnessing in America, that is, would also be the age of mediocrity. And when he said this, in saying this, you see the colon, that's very important. So punctuation marks are crucial to understanding. In saying this, he was thinking primarily of a regime of equality governed by impersonal rules. That means if democracy was just governed by the rule of law, where everybody is equal before law, then such a democracy would be an age of mediocrity. That means everybody will be equal, and therefore no one will be smarter than them. There'll be no auntie number one and hero number one. Everybody will be the same. So it will be a dead level plane of achievement in practically every sphere of life. The age of democracy would be an unheroic age. That means everyone will be more or less equal, and no one will be more meritorious than the other. So heroic obviously means maybe better than the other or superior in social status or whatever, right? Okay, so this is what he said. Now, how is that relevant to our equality principle, which is mentioned in para 1? So, democracy has this equality principle, equality before the law, equality governed by impersonal rules. So, such a system would be an age of mediocrity. Then, para 3, but modern democracies have not been able to do without heroes. So heroes. Now heroes, first para talks of the leadership principle. So some of these heroes probably are related. Anyway, let us see further. This too was foreseen with much misgiving by Tocqueville. So Tocqueville viewed this with misgiving because he believed, rightly or wrongly, that unlike in an aristocratic society, where the aristocratic lords, they are the heroes, they are the leaders, they own land, they have peasants working for them, they enjoy certain privileged positions in society. So in aristocratic societies, people are not equal. They don't pretend that there is equality. But democracy is supposed to have equality because it is by the people, of the people, for people, and for everyone, the rich, poor. So everybody, there should be no rich and poor. Everybody should actually be equal. So aristocratic societies are different. So in a democracy, there was no proper place in a democracy for heroes. So in a democracy, there should be no privileged one with more social status or political power or anything of that sort. So, and hence when they arose, that means such heroes arose, they would sooner or later turn into despots. That means in a democracy, there is no proper place for heroes, or let's say leaders, because he mentioned leaders in the very first para, so he's probably relating it with that. And these leaders will sooner or later become so powerful that they'll become dictatorial in their ways, they'll become cruel, they'll try to impose their will on the people and thereby destroy democracy. A despot and democracy don't go together. So, can you see there is something happening here which is the one principle cannot be promoted without some sacrifice of the other. So, if a hero rises, he'll become a despot. That means he'll destroy democracy. Then there'll be no equality before the law as well, because he'll be an unequal. He'll be an unequal among equals. He and his coterie of people who are enjoying absolute power. So the clear contrast, the conflict between these two principles, equality before the law, equal to everybody the same, so mediocre, no meritocracy, nobody with greater power or privilege, right? But if somebody emerges, some leader emerges, he will sooner or later destroy the rule of law and convert the democracy into a despotic rule. So these two paras clearly elaborate on. The author is choosing what Alexis de Tocqueville had said to support his the unique perspective that he is trying to present. So no proper place in a democracy for heroes, and hence when they arose, they would sooner or later turn into despots. Okay, so let's see how further he develops this. Okay, let's see how the author develops his thought further. Para 4. In a world preoccupied with scientific rationality, the advantages of a system based on an impersonal rule of law should be a recommendation with everybody. So again, he's talking of the equality principle. So if you have a scientific temper, you're logical, obviously you would like a rule of law, right? There is something orderly and predictable about such a system. In a small community, you can probably, live without any written law and with certain hierarchies already established. There's a panchayat in a village, so everybody just follows a certain system and they can manage their affairs. But in a large society, organized living would be impossible without a system of impersonal rules. That means the equality principle in any society, and here obviously we're talking of democracy, is a must, is an absolute necessity. And this uh, equality before the law guarantees that nobody is above the law, right? Whatever his station in life, however privileged or powerful that person may be. Okay, next, para 5. But a system governed solely by impersonal rules can at best ensure order and stability. So, for order and stability, it is a must, it is necessary. What else do we want other than order and stability? So, it cannot create a shining vision of a future in which mere formal equality will be replaced by real equality and fellowship. So that means we want something more than formal equality, which is probably referring to the rule of law. If you're equal before the law, for namesake you're equal, but actually there is such a wide difference between the poor and the rich, right? Real equality will be when that difference between the rich and poor is minimum, and all people have genuine, not just equality before the law, but equality of opportunity as well, so that even a poor person has the opportunity to take a loan, give a startup, has opportunity to education, health, etc., right, provided by the government, and maybe equality of outcome as well. To a large extent, all those who are really poor should be given a leg up by the government by providing them some basic income, or some direct transfer into the banks. So that's how you reduce the inequality and try to get as close to real equality as possible. So that means this equality principle can give you order and stability. It cannot give you a vision of how this formal equality under the law will be replaced by real equality in society, where the wealth is distributed more equitably among the people. So, a world governed by impersonal rules cannot easily change itself, or when it does, the change is so gradual as to make the basic and fundamental feature of society appear unchanged. Why? Why is this? This is something which will not strike you immediately, because why can't a world governed by rules change itself? Why does it change so gradually? Are rules a hindrance to change? Are the lengthy bureaucratic procedures where no person can be corrupt, no person can twist the rules to his advantage? So, rules are made in a way that the procedures become very long. Every file has to go through about multiple tables, get approvals, get ideas and contributions. Committees are formed. There is a form of collective decision making in the government. So, all this red tape, government procedures and processes, this is what doesn't allow basic fundamental change to take place. Actually, I understood this immediately because I have been in government. I was 8 years in naval headquarters and I saw how the government functioned. And I rebelled against it. I said, why don't I go and join in the private sector where I'll have enough powers to take my decisions and change things on the ground fast? and make things happen. We could not get the Rafale fighter jet for our Air Force for 10 years. Files just kept getting bigger. So the change is so gradual, or there's hardly any change, right? So all because of impersonal rules. Why? You don't want a person to be accountable to take a decision. While in the private sector, you have the CEO who's personally responsible, along with the board of directors, to the shareholders, right? Here in the government, nobody is responsible to anybody because everything is impersonal. So this is one aspect which many of you will not understand unless you know how governments function and how despite repeated administrative reforms, the procedure, every administrative reform only makes the procedure more ponderous and more complicated, that you just can't bring about change. Getting a contract issued is so difficult. So therefore, for any kind of basic or fundamental change, you actually need somebody to push, a kind of individual. That means some person. A person has to come, his initiative. Let's say like Gadkari, whose personal initiative created new rules, new terms and conditions for construction of highways and roads in a country, which he gave model contracts, a lot of, he simplified everything, gave it to states. Uh, so progress on infrastructure, especially roads and highways, progress so fast. So you need some kind of a leader, some person to come in and change the rules to make things happen on the ground. And this is what 6 says: the issue of leadership thus acquires crucial significance in the context of change. And why do we want change? Because we are only in a state of formal equality. We want to go to real equality. We want development to take place so that the poor and the rich, the inequality between them reduces. Okay, so far there is tension between these two principles, and the equality principle is necessary for order and stability, but it cannot bring about basic fundamental change. It is therefore stopping fundamental change, and therefore you need a leader. So the leadership principle comes in to bring change. And what is the change you want? From whatever state, the state of inequality that is there in society, to reduce that inequality and take us to real and substantive equality. So if the modern age is preoccupied with scientific rationality, so as a modern society, we all have a scientific temper, we are logical, and we are also preoccupied with change. We demand that we get our rights. We formed a democratic society so that the government works for the people, for all the people. So to accept what exists on its own terms is traditional, not modern. So he is taking some digression here. And it may be all very well to appreciate tradition in music, dance, and drama. So let me just explain this aspect, because later we'll come to a question. So what he's trying to say here is that it may be all very well to appreciate tradition in music, dance, and drama. That means in the cultural sphere, you can remain traditional. It may be all very well. There's no problem in that. But for society as a whole, the choice has already been made in favor of modernization and development. That means society as a whole, even the people who have traditional thinking, they agree that we must modernize our agriculture. We must get into higher industrialization, higher high-tech areas, so that we can compete with the rest of the world and develop as a nation. So society, a modern, scientific, rational society today uh, can be traditional so far as the cultural sphere is concerned, but in terms of economic development, obviously everybody is in favor of modernization of development. That is the route to alleviate poverty, to remove poverty from the country and get more people into the middle class and thereby reduce the extreme inequality that exists in our society. So, moreover, in some countries like India, the gap between ideal is that everybody is by God equal, right? There's very little difference in their wealth and reality. So, in India, the gap between the ideal, that is real equality, and the reality has become so great that the argument for development and change is now irresistible. So, in a country like India, therefore, you just don't need the equality principle. You need the leadership principle more than the equality principle. Because the inequalities in our country are so wide that we need strong leadership to give us real or substantive equality. So he continues with this idea further. In these countries, there's no for uh, for development. There's great appeal among the people, right? Development is the condition for the mitigation, if not the elimination of inequality. It's impractical to assume that you can remove inequality. You can at best mitigate it, reduce it. So come as close as possible to real and substantive equality. There is something contradictory about the very presence of large inequalities in a society which professes to be democratic. India says we are a democratic society. Does a poor man does he feel that he is living in a democratic society when the rich have all the privileges, the power, the wealth, and he has nothing? Is that is where he exercises voting power? This is what he gets, right? He has just the freedom to starve. He doesn't have equality of opportunity. He has no way to work hard and become rich. So, what kind of a democracy is this? So, obviously, in the eyes of those people who've been left out in a democratic society, they will feel that, how can there be such large inequalities? We call ourselves democratic. And they all vote for a government so that that government works for them, works for the poor as well as the rich. But still, there are such large inequalities. So, obviously, a democracy has failed if there are such large inequalities. Now, why has it failed? Is the equality principle not good enough? Yes, it has only given us order and stability. It has not helped us remove these large inequalities. Who does that? Who brings about that change? Leadership. So that's where you need leadership. So it does not take people too long to realize that democracy by itself, that means the equality principle, equality before the law, can guarantee only formal equality. Beyond this, it can only whet people's appetite, sharpen people's appetite for real and substantive equality. A poor man says, yes, okay, so I'm equal before the law, right? Salman Khan had to go to jail. Good, he deserves it, right? Now he feels, I want more now. I want to be rich. I want a good job, right? I want more wealth. So from this arises their continued preoccupation with plans and schemes that will help to bridge the gap between the ideal and reality, and the reality which is equality, and the reality which is so contrary to it. So the government then starts making 5-year plans. You had a planning commission, and this scheme. Uh, So, food for work or creating work for people. So, all kinds of schemes which have never succeeded in giving you real equality, right? For real equality, you actually need a leader who is committed and personally accountable to the people to push it in that direction. So when pre-existing rules give no clear indication, directions of change, leadership comes on its own. So when the rules in a way are acting as a hindrance to change, then leader takes charge, right? Every democracy invests its leaders with a measure of charisma and expects from it a corresponding measure of energy and vitality. Now, the greater the urge for change in a society, like India, like country where inequalities are so extreme, the stronger the appeal of a dynamic leadership in it. So let's say Modi is a dynamic leader who has a lot of charisma, energy, and vitality. So people expect him to bring about change. So this dynamic leader finds that the equality principle or the rules are actually a hindrance to change. So a dynamic leadership seeks to free itself from the constraints of existing rules. In a sense, that is the test of his dynamism. That means any leader who tries to free himself from rules, he is dynamic. That means if you want to be a dynamic leader, you have to break a lot of rules. So this is what he is actually saying. That shows the contradiction or the tension between the equality principle and the leadership principle. Leadership wants to bring about change in a hurry. People have elected him. He is committed. He is accountable to them. By the next election, he has to show change. How does he get change? If he follows the government bureaucratic procedures, he may build half a highway which may drop, in the next rain, may be washed away. Okay. So he therefore seeks to free himself from the rules which is a hindrance to change. And if he's a more dynamic leader, he will. So it's a test of his dynamism. Like, let's say Prime Minister Modi said, leave this defense procurement procedure, all this bloody red tapeism is killing us, is not letting us move. So he said, let me just have a personal talk with the president of uh, France and get into a government to government straight away so that all these procedures and all this don't come in the way. So he kind of short circuited procedures. There was a lot of opposition, there was a lot of CAG, etc., etc. But at least the Indian Air Force has now got the Rafale, and we are in a better position to defend ourselves. So, dynamic leader seeks to free itself from the constraints of existing rules, and that is a test of his dynamism. So, in this process, it may take a turn at which it ceases to regard itself. That means the leadership does not regard itself as being bound by the rules, placing itself above them. So, leadership gradually finds that rules are just acting as a hindrance. So, he's like, so I push them aside. He crushes them under his feet. He thinks I am above the rule. People have elected me. I'm responsible to them. I'll do anything. Forget about rules. No rules are going to stop me from doing it. So this is that tension. This is the tension referred to in para 1. That is a tension between leadership and equality, because the equality principle, the rules are acting as a hindrance to change, and this guy has to bring about change because he is committed to it. He has promised the people. They have elected him because they wanted him to bring about change. And the rules are acting as a hindrance. So what does he do? So there's a natural antagonistic relationship between these two principles. So there is always a tension between charisma and discipline. Charisma is leadership, discipline is imposed by the rules, right? And when this leadership puts forward revolutionary claims, the tension tends to be resolved at the expense of discipline. So obviously the rules are sidelined and the leadership pushes its way to final bringing about the end result. So by the way, here I think the whole passage, the unity of thought completes itself. Para 1, so you formed a mind map of the thought flow in your head, and here the tension clearly comes out. That is why there is tension. Okay. One is good for instability, but not hindrance to change. So this guy has leadership, has to bring about change. So therefore he sidelines the rules and goes ahead. Last para, characteristically, the legitimacy of such a leadership rests on its claim to be able to abolish or at least substantially reduce the existing inequalities in society. So people have elected him to develop the country, develop the economy, so that the existing inequalities between poor and rich are substantially reduced. So he's got that mandate from the people to do it. So, from the argument that formal equality or equality before the law is but a limited good, so it's a good, yes, you need it, but it's a limited good. It has its limitations. It can only do that much. It, in fact, acts as a hindrance to change. It is often one short step to the argument that it is a hindrance or an obstacle to the establishment of real or substantive equality. Yes, that's how he's brought it out, that rules which are impersonal, where no person is accountable, it's collective responsibility, committees and boards and files moving to between ministries, between people in the same ministry. The procedures are so long winded that nothing moves. So the conflict between a progressive executive, now executive is obviously the government, progressive is one who wants to bring about change, and a conservative judiciary. Now, so obviously, progressive executive represents the leadership principle, and conservative judiciary is why conservative? Conservative means which does not want change, which is resistant to change. Now, legislature has made some rules. Judiciary is the custodian and the upholder of of the rules created by the legislature. So they are not allowed to change. They have to ensure that those are implemented. They are merely the upholder of the rules. So if the dynamic leader breaks the rules, conservative judiciary will catch him, right? So there'll be a conflict between, let's say, the government, the leadership, the prime minister, the chief minister, and the high court or supreme court, because they will say you can't break these rules, you have to follow proper procedures, right? So this conflict naturally acquires piquancy when the executive is elected, your leader is elected, and the judges have only been appointed. So इससे एक खट्टा मीठा स्वाद आता है कि देखो जी, जुडिशरी जो केवल अपॉइंटेड है वो इलेक्टेड एग्जीक्यूटिव के साथ लड़ रही है, उसको it has the power to stop him from breaking rules. So last para is more of a, let's say, a passing comment, and I think the mind map is quite clear in your head. Let us see how it looks like. So here in this table, roughly you would have summarized your mind map of the thought flow. There are two principles and there's tension between them. Democracy rests on this tension. Equality principle is all about equality before the law, the impersonal rule of law, which gives you formal equality. Leadership has been elected, given power by the people to remove the inequalities in society and get to the ideal of a democracy, which is real substantive equality, or at least the mitigation, the reduction of inequalities within the society. Now, equality principle, the custodian and upholder is the judiciary or the conservative judiciary, and leadership is elected to power. It has the backing of the majority of the people. So that is the progressive executive, which wants to bring about change and uh, exercise the will of the people. So this is how these two principles stand against and opposed to each other. Equality principle is necessary for order and stability, but a hindrance to fundamental change because of impersonal rules. That word impersonal is the problem. We are all scared that people will work in their own interests and will be corrupt, and procedures are made so long winded that nobody can bring in any personal aspect. Nobody can favor, Anil Ambani or Adani or so and so, right? So the rules become so long that you get tied up in red tape. That is why it's a hindrance to change. While leadership principle, then That plays a role. Because this is a hindrance to change, and the leadership has been asked by the people, please change the society, please develop the economy, give us a chance to work and become rich, right? Give our family the basic necessities and a higher standard of living. So this is what people want. So leadership is necessary for fundamental change because of personal commitment and accountability to the people, who that is the essence of a democracy. The democracy is of the people, by the people have elected. So you are working in a way on behalf of the people, and therefore you are accountable to the people, and then for the people. For means for all of the people, not just the rich. So therefore leadership considers itself above the law, because law is a hindrance. So that is where the tension comes in, because the leadership considers itself above the law. And let's recall what Tocqueville had said, that if a democracy just has one principle on which it is living or surviving, the equality principle, it will be an age of mediocrity. There'll be no heroes. That means it doesn't allow heroes to rise, it doesn't allow leaders to come up. It mows down everybody to mediocrity. So equality principle is antagonistic to the leadership principle in that manner. And the leadership principle, if it emerges, if heroes emerge in a democracy, which they eventually do, they destroy the equality principle. They destroy democracy and become despots, because they consider themselves above the law. So I thought this was an amazing passage. Probably it was an editorial in an Indian newspaper when some conflict between some chief minister and maybe high court somewhere. There was some problem going on when this editorial must have come up. Let us see the questions now. Okay, question one. Which of the following four statements can be inferred from the above passage? There is a conflict between the pursuit of equality and individuality. So again, you see, the CAT examiner never uses the same words. He keeps playing around with words. So these are all option traps laid for you. So obviously, equality refers to the equality principle, individuality, where they talk of individual initiative, hero, leadership. So all those are being used synonymously. They are just two things. So equality and leadership. So obviously, that's what you can infer. There's a conflict between them, which is so obviously explained throughout. So A can be inferred. B, the disadvantages of impersonal rules was what? That advantages were that it is necessary for order and stability. Disadvantage was that it is a hindrance to change. Can be overcome in some small communities. Now, the small community was not even mentioned in this context. Small community was mentioned in the context that in a small community, when people know each other, the hierarchy is already laid down, so you don't need impersonal rules, because everything is personally linked with each other. So, order and stability in small communities is maintained through personal relationships. So, therefore, impersonal rules are only required in large societies for order and stability. So, this obviously is a distortion. There's playing around with to see whether you've understood properly or not. C. Despite limitations, impersonal rules are essential in large systems or large societies. Yes, impersonal rules are essential. Life would be impossible without order and stability and impersonal rules in a large system. That is clearly stated. It has limitations. It is a limited good. It doesn't provide you a shining vision. In fact, it is a hindrance to change. So, virtually, she is saying, despite being a hindrance to change, impersonal rules are necessary for a large society. Now, this is not how the author has presented his thoughts. He said impersonal rules necessary for order and stability, but hindrance to change, hence leadership required for change. So he's linked three ideas together that way. C is by using the connective despite or the preposition despite is actually conveying two different thoughts and relating them differently. So you see, can you see how clever the CAT examiner is? That C is a wrong option because of the word despite alone. Limitations, yes. Impersonal rules are essential, yes. Both are true. But the true things, if joined by despite, right? If this statement had been impersonal rules are essential but have limitations, the but would have worked. But despite having limitation, they are essential. That means anything with limitation normally, should not be essential, but this happens to be essential. So they are conveying a distorted meaning. So therefore, B and C cannot be inferred. Let us look at D, inspired leadership. Now again, inspired leadership or dynamic leadership, rather than plans and schemes. There was a mention of plans and schemes that we keep thinking of plans and schemes, but change doesn't come about. For basic fundamental change, you need a leader. So a leader is needed to bring about change, and obviously what change? From formal equality to real equality or mitigation of inequality. So it's more effective in bridging inequality. So D obviously is stated. So A and D, but not B and C. So answer is 3. Let us see question 2. Tocqueville believed that the age of democracy would be an unheroic one because, now if you remember, I highlighted this while reading that colon, when he said that the age of democracy would be an age of mediocrity or an unheroic age, right? Mediocre also means unheroic, right? In saying this, there was a colon, and he said when Tocqueville said this, he was thinking of a society governed by the impersonal rule of law. That means by the equality principle. So here, it, option 1, democratic principles, which is the equality principle or equality before the law, do not encourage heroes. They don't want a guy come up as hero and think that he is above the law. So therefore, 1 is the answer. Here someone may like option 3 because that is also stated in the passage that Tocqueville said that heroes that emerge in democracies would become despots and destroy democracy itself, right? But that is not why age of democracy will be unheroic. If heroes are going to emerge, then how is it unheroic? So 3 is what he said later, after he had said that age of democracy would be an age of mediocrity or an unheroic age because democratic principles do not encourage heroes, but heroes will emerge in any case, and when they emerge, they'll destroy equality principle and democracy. So 3 comes as a sequel or as a later idea. So answer of 2 is 1. Question 3, dynamic leaders are needed in democracies because. So if your mind map is there in your head, look at that. Don't look at options first. Dynamic leaders are to bring about change and to bridge the inequality, to go for real change, etc., etc. Right? They're needed for that purpose. Okay. So this is what you remember, and probably think that there will be an option like this. But let's look at it now. 1. Because leaders have adopted the principle of formal equality, they have not. They are in fact antagonistic, these two principles. So 1 is out. Formal equality whets people's appetite for substantive equality. So leaders are needed because equality principle doesn't offer them enough. So it sharpens their appetite for this. So therefore, dynamic leaders should give them that. So to an extent, okay. 2 seems okay. 3. Systems that rely on impersonal rule of formal equality lose their ability to make large changes. That is why dynamic leaders are needed to bring about large changes by bypassing rules if necessary. So 3 makes more sense. So Dynamic leaders are needed in democracies because a democratic system based on the equality principle is a hindrance to change. It can only bring about gradual change. Therefore, you need dynamic leaders to bring about basic fundamental change. So, obviously, 3 is the answer. Question 4. Which of the following statements would support the statement in the passage that a world governed by impersonal rules cannot easily change itself, or when it does, the change is so gradual as to make the basic and fundamental feature of society appear unchanged? That means the rules, the administrative procedures, which are again rules laid within which government officials have to proceed and bring about development on the ground, right? They cannot implement, government cannot implement basic fundamental change, only gradual change through these rules. So, A, governments get tied down in red tape and fail to deliver. So, these rules tie them down. So, A obviously is supporting that statement. Government projects are mired in corruption, leading to time and cost overruns. So, there's no suggestion of corruption, even a hint of that anywhere. C, impersonal rules focus on processes and procedures and not on personal accountability. So in government, nobody is personally accountable. If Rafale doesn't come, nobody can catch somebody and say that because you were defense secretary, the Rafale hasn't come, and say India has lost this war. Okay, so impersonal rules, they just see procedure was properly followed. Yes, so everybody is above board, no problem. If nothing has moved on the ground, so what? Okay, so nobody is concerned about actual change taking place and nobody is personally accountable. So, this is how actually governments function. So, C is what that statement supports, right? That the processes and procedures don't allow change to come about, and a person is not accountable, so nobody can say why didn't the change come about. So, the change doesn't come about. He's not really concerned. He's only concerned about following processes and procedures. D. Government projects face funding problems leading to slow progress of work. Again, funding, corruption, these aspects were not brought in. So obviously it is A and C. So option 2. A and C, but not B and D. Question 5. What possible factor would a dynamic leader consider a hindrance in achieving the development goals of a nation? So we've seen that what he would consider a hindrance would be the equality principle, the rules. So that is why he considers himself above the rules. So whenever, if you have formed a mind map of the thought flow in your head, go there straight away. Review it every time. Then look at the options. So what would you consider a hindrance? So principle of equality before the law, yes, he would consider that as a hindrance. Judicial activism, where judiciary is trying to be too active, going beyond their role, that has not even been mentioned. It's judiciary's job to uphold the law. So judiciary itself is a hindrance, right? So a conservative judiciary, yes, that is a hindrance. And need for discipline, yes, his charisma cannot carry him away. So he should not, he should stay within the rules and be disciplined. So now you end up having 3 answers, 1, 3, and 4. This virtually kind of matches with your understanding. But obviously, if you see in the later paras, finally he brings about a conflict between the progressive executive and a conservative judiciary. So actually a chief minister or a prime minister and a Supreme Court bench. So that practically, if a prime minister or chief minister violates or oversteps the law, it is the Supreme Court or High Court which will get him back within the rules. So the real hindrance, if Prime Minister Modi has to think of bypassing rules, what is he worried about really? Practically, what he is worried about, on one side, it is the opposition. That opposition will not let him function in the parliament, right? But the real worry is that Supreme Court will pass an injunction, right? He may have to face the judiciary as to why did you not follow proper procedure at every step. So the real practical difficulty is the physical presence of a judiciary in a democracy which is there to uphold the law and will not let even the prime minister violate it. So therefore 3 is the practical difficulty. While 1 and 4 are theoretical at a conceptual level, yes, that is the problem. So answer of 5 therefore is 3. So see how the CAT examiner has made tricky questions. Question 6. Which of the following 4 statements can be inferred from the above passage? Scientific rationality is an essential feature of modernity. So that is mentioned in a modern age preoccupied with scientific rationality. So they all go together. So A can be inferred. Scientific rationality results in the development of impersonal rules. Yes, in a society which is scientifically rational, a system of rules will be a recommendation with everybody. That is what was said somewhere in para 4. So B is correct. Modernization and development have been chosen over traditional music, dance, and drama. Now, this is a distortion of what was said. It was said it may be well to appreciate traditional dance, music, and drama. So, within the cultural sphere, if you stick to traditional, your traditional culture, dance forms, etc., etc., that is okay. That doesn't conflict or have with the general acceptance of modernization and development for the economic and social development of the nation, right? Towards greater progress and finally for mitigating the inequality in society. So it has not been chosen over that. Both have been chosen, modernization and development in the economic and social field, and in the cultural field, you can choose your traditions. So C is a distortion of what is stated. Democracies aspire to achieve substantive equality. Yes, they're working for the people, of the people, by the people. The people are voting governments to power. They want the governments to give them real equality. They don't want such extreme inequalities in society. So therefore, D is very much part of what has been stated. So A, B, D, but not C. So option 1. Okay, we are now at the end. Last 2 questions. Question 7. Why is there something contradictory about the very presence of large inequalities in a society which professes to be democratic? So, this we remember having understood as if you're democratic, you should be equal, there should be freedom for everybody to become rich, work hard, and so on and so forth. So, there should be equality of opportunity, etc., etc. So, there shouldn't be such large inequalities. There's something wrong with that. So, look at the options. Democratic societies strive for social justice by offering extensive liberties to everyone. So that is why there's something contradictory. Uh, so just by giving liberty, you're giving them social justice. What about the economic inequality? So some of this doesn't seem to address that issue. Democratic societies are based on the principles of equality before the law. So that only gives you formal equality. The large inequalities still continue to exist. So this is not what makes it contradictory. Democratic societies are made up of the people and run by the people and for the people and for every one of the people, the rich, the poor, the middle class. So why should there be large inequalities? So this is the one that highlights why it's contradictory, that you call yourself a democracy which is for the people, by everyone, and then why is it working only for the rich? So that addresses this issue. So 3 is the option. 4, democratic societies support freedom and meritocracy. So therefore the large inequalities is a contradiction. This in fact supports that large inequality. That means meritorious people and the unmeritorious are low, and the meritorious are more equal, or they are the rich. So this is not showing the contradiction. This is in fact supporting why inequality should be there. So 4 is obviously not the option. Last question. A key argument the author is making is that in the context of extreme inequality, the issue of leadership has limited significance. In fact, the more extreme the inequality, the more the need for leadership. If a society was fairly equal and there were hardly any inequalities, you don't need a leader for change. Then whatever government, little bit the government is doing, that's good enough to maintain that level, right? So leadership has limited uh, significance if there is no inequality. So in a country like India, leadership is very much important. Democracy is incapable of eradicating inequality. The equality of law, or the equality principle based on the impersonal rule of law, yes, that is a hindrance to eradicating inequality, hindrance to bring about the change towards eradicating inequality. Formal equality facilitates development and change. No, it doesn't. It is a hindrance to change. Impersonal rules are good for avoiding instability but fall short of achieving real equality. Yes, they are necessary for change, for order and stability, but leadership is required for change because impersonal rules or the equality principle falls short of achieving real equality. It only gives you formal equality. So this point has been repeated very often within the questions. Here there are just one or two questions which I have framed, otherwise they were all earlier CAT questions. So with this, we have seen how forming a mind map of the thought flow, linking ideas as you go along is very important. And then, the answer will just hit you, whether it's correct or not. As you read it, the option you can eliminate. You don't have to apply some great techniques to eliminate. Of course, you should be aware of option traps. You see, CAT examiner lays down very fine close choices, and those act as option traps, like that despite limitations, impersonal rules are essential in large societies. So that kind of a stuff. So those are the things you have to be careful about. Thank you.